The warning that saved my life arrived disguised as a polite buzz beneath a folded linen napkin. I felt it against my thigh as my son lifted a crystal glass and said, "To fresh starts," while his wife beamed like the hostess of the year. Candlelight sparkled in the facets of the chandelier. Steam rose from a pot roast big enough to feed a platoon, and the table between us looked like a magazine spread. Bone china, silver chargers, napkins folded into perfect peaks. We had not shared a quiet meal in years. Tonight was supposed to be a truce. The buzz came again. I slipped a hand under the table, stole a look at my phone, and saw a message from an unsaved number. "Stand up and leave. Now, don't tell your son." My pulse stuttered. I reread the line 3 times, hoping I'd misread it, that it would change on the 4th, that this was spam, a misdial, a prank. But those 6 words sat there like a hand over my throat. "Dad?" My son asked, wineglass hovering near his mouth. "You all right?" He had my eyes and his mother's smile. When he was a boy, his hair stuck up like a dandelion gone to seed. Tonight it was barbered to within an inch of its life and shellacked into obedience. He wore an elegant navy jacket, a brown leather watch, and the slightly strained expression of someone hosting a performance he couldn't afford to let fail. "I'm fine," I said. "Bathroom." "Second door, right of the hall," his wife chimed, her voice smooth as a television anchor's. "Do you need me to?" "I can find it," I said. I rose slowly, as if my knees were older than the rest of me, as if the only thing on my mind was age, and not a text that read like a fire alarm. The hallway beyond their dining room swallowed sound. In the framed mirror, a man I knew too well paused in a suit he wore only for weddings and funerals and moments when he wanted to look like a father instead of the old restaurant man he was. In the glass, he looked like both. My late wife would have teased me for tugging at my collar, told me to breathe from my belly, and then smoothed my lapel with that gentle downward press of her palm she'd done for 40 years. The bathroom door was on the right. I kept walking. Soft light fell across hardwood floors the color of honey. The air smelled like rosemary, butter, and the faint ozone scent of something recently cleaned. The kitchen door swung inward at my touch, and the world changed. Chrome appliances, a 10-burner range, 2 sinks, a marble island the size of my first studio apartment. And there, at the far sink, sleeves rolled to the elbows, stood a middle-aged woman with salt and pepper hair in a low knot, rinsing wine glasses as if they were priceless. She must have heard the door, but she didn't turn. She didn't look at me at all. She simply kept rinsing, and as she lifted a glass, her hands trembled. Not a spill, not a clatter, just an almost imperceptible quake that told me she knew something and didn't dare show it. "Evening," I whispered. Her shoulders tightened. She neither nodded nor spoke. She set the glass upside down on a towel and reached for another. It was the most eloquent silence I'd ever heard. The back door had a narrow pane of glass. On the other side, a neat rectangle of lawn, garden lights, a black iron gate. I moved toward it. The woman kept rinsing. As I reached for the latch, my phone buzzed again. I glanced down. "Now, please." "Thank you," I whispered to the woman. I didn't know for what. She closed her eyes and dipped another glass in suds. Outside, the night whispered. Garden lights cast little islands of yellow across emerald grass. The iron gate clicked under my palm. I stepped into a quiet street lined with maples and houses so big they looked like they'd sprouted columns at birth. I turned right, then left, then right again. 3 random moves to break line of sight, and only then did I stop beneath a street lamp and call a car. While the app spun, I called the number that had texted me. 2 rings. A careful voice, low, guarded. "Mr. Hale?" I didn't recognize the voice. I recognized the tone. It belonged to people who had decided to do something brave and terrifying and were now all the way down the path with only forward left. "Who is this?" I asked. "I can't tell you that. Please don't ask." "What is going on?" My own voice surprised me, quiet and flat, the way it gets when the kitchen printer in one of my restaurants runs out of paper right as a 20 top sits down and you have to make 5 decisions in 10 seconds without letting anyone see your clutch of panic. "Your son and his wife added a compound to your whiskey. They intended to present documents for you to sign while you were cooperative." The word hung there. "What compound?" "It goes by different names," the voice said. "The label I saw called it Zetronol. It amplifies alcohol, makes judgment soft, memory fogged. People will agree to almost anything to get it done and go rest when they're dosed. By morning, they remember a nice evening and a headache. This was the part where a rational father laughs. This was the part where a decent father says you've made a mistake. You have the wrong man. This was the part where denial erects barricades and plants flags and refuses to budge. My denial didn't move. Instead, my mind played back small, precise reels from the dining room like clips I hadn't realized I'd filmed. My son refilling my glass before I could finish it. His wife's hand resting lightly on my wrist while she asked about my plans for the future. The way they kept repeating that phrase, fresh start, like a brand name. Why would he? I stopped. The oldest, hardest truth in parenting is that our children can hurt us in ways no one else can. It's the cost of letting them in. He owes $2.3 million, the voice said. Not to a bank. I felt the night air slip under my suit jacket and raise gooseflesh along my arms. How long? 11 days. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, my car's headlights were swinging around the corner. Why are you helping me? I asked. Because what they're doing is wrong. Because you looked kind when you arrived. Because somebody has to try. A pause, and softer. Because I have a father too. The line clicked dead. I slid into the back seat. Back to Queens, I told the driver. And then, almost immediately, no. Wait. I watched the polished darkness of Sycamore Ridge, this wealthy New Jersey neighborhood where my son now lived, glide past the window. I thought about the woman at the sink who kept her eyes down and her hands steady, because looking up would have cracked the world open. I thought about the woman I had loved since 19, gone now 2 years, and the way she had believed, with stubborn, unfashionable conviction, that the right thing is still the right thing when it hurts. I opened the police app on my phone and dialed. Emergency, what's your situation? My name is Thomas Hale, I said. I believe my son attempted to drug me for the purpose of obtaining my signature on fraudulent documents. I left the house. The evidence is still there. The dispatcher had a steady, practiced voice. By the time we looped back towards Sycamore Ridge, unmarked sedans had taken up dark positions half a block from my son's driveway. The driver's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel as we pulled up next to them. You sure, sir? He asked low. No, I said. But I'm going back anyway. The front door opened before I rang. My son filled the frame with a worried smile. Dad, there you are. We were going to call hospitals. He reached for my shoulder. His hand was warm, his grip familiar. You okay? Needed air, I said. Got turned around. Big neighborhood. Come inside, his wife said. Let's get you some coffee. We were so worried. We returned to the dining room. The table had been cleared in the time I was gone. 2 cleared. The crystal decanter that held my gift sat full again, shining. 2 glasses stood near it. A third, a fresh one, with a faint swirl of something unmixed, waited at my place. My son cleared his throat. Before dessert, a quick toast. To new beginnings. The smallest tremor rippled his voice. I sat, but didn't touch the glass. When you were 8, I said, conversational as a Sunday, you asked for a dog and promised to walk it every morning. Do you remember what happened? He blinked. What? You insisted you'd take care of it, I continued. Your mother and I said we'd think about it. Then one morning, I found you sitting on the back steps with the leash in your lap, waiting in the cold at 6 a.m. You stayed there for an hour without complaint. That's when I knew you understood responsibility. That's why we said yes. His throat worked. He picked up his glass. Dad, let's. I never forgot that, I said. How someone shows up at 6 in the morning tells you everything about who they are at 6 in the evening. My phone vibrated in my pocket. 3 knocks sounded at the door. Not frantic. Official. Certain. Police, a voice called. Open up. My son stood so fast his chair skidded backward and struck the sideboard. His wife went white. Then the housekeeper, she'd appeared in the doorway without a sound, folded her hands together and closed her eyes. The rest happened in a series of clean, professional movements. Officers. Gloves. Evidence bags. My son's protests. My steady statement. The faint glitter in the bottom of my glass, swirling in an officer's beam of light. The folder in my son's study labeled Succession. Inside, a stack of documents pre-filled with my name. General power of attorney, assignment of membership interests, resolutions that would make him sole signatory on accounts I had built with my back and my wife's patience. Even the signature lines were marked with sticky flags. All that was missing was my hand. Dad, my son whispered as they cuffed him. Please, they're going to break my legs. You don't know what these men will do. He was 36. He looked 12. I know what you were willing to do, I said. They let him out. On the second landing, he twisted back. Mom would forgive me. Your mother believed forgiveness and accountability can shake hands, I said. They never let go of each other. When the cruiser doors shut and the red-blue strobe faded down Sycamore Ridge's immaculate street, the house felt like a stage someone had finally cut the power to. My son's wife stood in the foyer with her mouth open like a word had been caught there and died. The housekeeper, she looked about 50, maybe a little more, with a face that should have been tired but had somehow not surrendered to it, smoothed her apron. Mr. Hale, she said softly. I turned to her. It was you. She flinched. Yes, sir. A beat. I am sorry for secrets in your house. But I could not. Her voice wobbled, then steadied. Some things a person cannot be part of and still say they are a person. What's your name? I asked. Rosa Alvarez, she said, and lifted her chin because names matter. I clean. I listen. I try to keep peace. I love my job when I work for people who let there be peace. This week, there was not peace. I didn't trust my voice. I nodded. She nodded back, and in that small exchange 2 strangers understood they were not strangers anymore. At the station, the fluorescent lights flattened everything. Detective Carver introduced himself with a handshake and a styrofoam cup of bad coffee. He had cop eyes that missed nothing and a patient way with words that told me he'd had to explain terrible things more than once to people who could not believe them. Here's how this goes, he said. We'll take a statement tonight. Forensics will analyze the whiskey. If the lab confirms Zetranol, we see that one with financial abuse, high-dollar fraud. Then your son and his wife are looking at serious charges. If the documents match what you describe, and we've already collected them, conspiracy and attempted theft by deception stack on top. The elder abuse statute is plain enough. It protects you even if you're sharp as a tack. The law says people don't get to play with your judgment. Across the hall, through glass, my son sat on a bench in a holding cell, elbows on his knees, head bowed. When he looked up, I saw the boy who used to run bases behind our restaurant with a ketchup mustache and skin knees. I also saw the man who printed sticky flags for where he wanted me to sign away my life. Mr. Hale, Detective Carver said quietly, following my gaze. I've been doing this 23 years. The folks who get hurt worst are the ones who think blood is a magic shield. I'm not telling you how to feel about your son. I'm telling you how to protect yourself from him. Thank you, I said. We finished after midnight. Carver handed me his card. You call me if anyone shows up at your door who doesn't have my name. And if anyone calls with threats, save the number. We track. Back in Queens, my little house felt like a place you could inhale properly. My wife, Evelyn, had picked the yellow for the kitchen walls because she liked that the room looked like morning even at night. Her teacup sat on the shelf where I kept it. The coat she'd loved hung behind the door. I still hadn't given it away. On the fridge, photographs of our son at 3, at 9, at 16. On our last Christmas together, we'd argued about him. Not in anger. In the way people who have always joined hands in the same canoe argue while they paddle. We will get through this water together. We did not. The water took her first. I took his pictures down. I didn't throw them out. I put them in a shoebox and wrote his name on the lid and slid it onto the top shelf of the hall closet. You can love someone and not let them sit on your refrigerator. At 9 the next morning, I called my attorney, a woman named Priya Mehta who had saved me from 3 bad leases, 1 deranged vendor, and every mistake a man of good intentions can make when confronted with a predatory contract. I told her everything. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she exhaled long and slow. Okay, she said, steel sliding under the silk of her voice. We freeze anything your son could touch. We notify your banks. We change signatory protocols. We file for a protective order. We update your will, your powers of attorney, your medical directives. And we do it today. I want to add a scholarship, I said. Tom, she said gently, you do not have to do philanthropy at this exact moment. I do, I said. It will remind me who I am. She paused. Then, all right. We'll draft the foundation papers too. In the afternoon, I called Rosa. I shouldn't ask you this, I said. And you should feel free to say no, but if you want a different job, one where the most dangerous thing is a dropped tray, you could come work for me. I need an assistant manager in Jackson Heights. I need someone who can tell the truth, even when it's inconvenient. On the other end of the line, she started to cry. Happy tears make a sound you can tell from grief if you've lived long enough. Senor Hale, she said, slipping into Spanish on the title, respectful out of habit. You don't know what this means. Rosa, I said, when I needed a stranger to be brave, you were brave. I know exactly what it means. She started Monday. She showed up early in clean black shoes and an ironed blouse, and kept her notebook open like a new student on the first day of a class she'd been waiting all her life to take. By Wednesday, she'd noticed we were bleeding 5% on produce wastage and found the hole. By Friday, our regulars knew her name and asked for her when they wanted an extra napkin and a real smile. Kindness with a backbone is a superpower in a dining room. News travels fast in neighborhoods where people eat at the same place twice a week. Someone's cousin worked at the clerk's office and recognized a last name on a docket. Someone else had a friend in the Sycamore Ridge PDA who saw squad cars at a house she'd driven past twice a day for years. I did not court gossip. I did not hide from it. When a customer whispered, "Is it true?" I said, "It is," and left it there. At the arraignment, my son wore a suit I'd paid for and a face I barely recognized. His wife's makeup couldn't hide the fact that she hadn't slept. My son's lawyer, a flashy, expensive man who probably charged per minute in 6-minute increments, argued that this was a misunderstanding, a family matter, an overreaction by an old man who'd had too much to drink. The prosecutor described the sedative. The judge looked at me and asked if I wished to speak. "I wish to be safe," I said, simple as a recipe. "I wish not to be drugged by my child. I wish not to have my businesses stolen while I am made compliant. And I wish, Your Honor, to keep this from happening to someone else." Bail came with conditions: no contact, surrender of passports, no access to my properties or accounts. My son nodded too quickly, as if by nodding he could make the judge think he agreed with the rules and therefore should be allowed to slip past them. He glanced back at me as they led him away. I kept my eyes on the judge. The forensic report took 10 days. It confirmed what we all already knew: Zetronol present in the whiskey that had been reserved as a special treat for the reunion. The lab technician's summary explained the mechanism in precise, government-approved language: synergistic potentiator, impaired executive function, increased compliance. In the margin, next to a line that described anterograde memory disruption, Detective Carver had written in a neat hand, "He wanted you to wake up grateful in the morning." The civil stuff, the accounts, the signature cards, the corporate resolutions, moved like a chess game in which we had both queens and my son had brought a spoon. Priya executed changes with elegant brutality. We added dual authorization to every transfer. We rewrote succession plans. We established an irrevocable trust with a board that included a teacher from the old neighborhood, a retired nurse who'd waited tables for us 15 years, and a nonprofit director my wife had admired. We named it the Evelyn Hale Fund and promised that every May, 2 kids from our zip codes, kids who worked hard at 3 in the afternoon the way my son had on that cold morning when he wanted a dog, would have a path into culinary school or nursing or whatever honest craft they loved. 3 weeks after the arrest, a man I didn't know came into my restaurant in a plaid jacket, ordered a coffee, didn't drink it, and left a business card with a phone number not attached to any business. The hostess had good instincts. She handed the card to Rosa. Rosa handed it to me with her mouth set in a line that meant, "Be careful." I called Detective Carver. "We'll swing by," he said. "And Tom, you don't owe men like that a conversation." That night, after the last table left, and we locked the door and the dishwashers hummed like night insects, Rosa wiped the table until it shone and said, "What if he writes to you? Your son. What will you do?" "I don't know," I said. "Answer him, maybe. Or not. Forgive him, probably. But not more than once at a time. People think forgiveness means turning your locks back the way they were. It doesn't. It means you don't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm." She nodded. "My father," he used to say, "Dios te perdona. El banco no." She smiled wryly at my look. God forgives, the bank does not. Both can be true. A person can be sorry and still owe what they owe. When the letter came, from the county jail, folded neatly, written in my son's tidy handwriting that had always looked like he was trying to pass for someone more disciplined than he was, I set it on the kitchen table and made tea. I stood by the sink for a long time before I opened it. Dad, it began. I know you're angry. I know you think I'm a monster. I was scared. I was in too deep. They were going to hurt me. Please help. Please sell one location. Just one. I'll pay you back. Mom would want you to. I read it twice. Then I wrote back. Liam, because that is his name, though I've waited too long to say it here, I did help you. I called the police. That is the only thing that keeps men who break legs from breaking necks. I can love you and not finance you. I can pray for you and not sign for you. Your mother would want you alive. I chose the path most likely to keep you that way. He wrote again, angrier this time. He wrote again, quiet. He wrote again, not at all about me, but about himself, which is the only honest subject for people who have fallen down a hole and want to stop digging. Then he stopped writing. I kept his letters in the same shoebox as his pictures. You can love someone and not keep their words where you make breakfast. At the preliminary hearing, his lawyer tried a different tactic, remorse on sale. He urged the court to consider addiction as a disease and me as a resource that should be leveraged compassionately. The judge's mouth did something halfway between a frown and a smile. The prosecutor's eyebrows went up an inch. I stood and said, Your Honor, I have compassion. It lives in the same house as consequences. 3 months after the arrest, my son stood and entered a plea to a reduced set of charges: attempt, conspiracy, financial exploitation of an older adult. His wife, Sabrina, took a deal for her cooperation and received fewer years than he. He looked at me when the judge asked whether anyone wished to speak. My legs remembered that they were attached to a man who used to carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs and stand on the line 12 hours and still go home and rock a baby who had colic until the neighbor's roosters crowed. I stood. Judge, I said, my wife and I raised a son to be more than his worst day. He chose to become less. I loved him then. I love him now. Love is not the question. Safety is. He can do his work from the inside. I will do mine from the outside. I hope one day our roads meet where decency lives. When we filed out, a journalist with hair so perfect it couldn't possibly sleep shoved a microphone at me and asked if I had a message for other parents. I said yes. If someone whispers, danger, don't wait to ask for their name. Get safe, then send a thank you card. We did. Rosa kept hers in a drawer at her new apartment in Corona, a place with 2 bedrooms and a balcony just big enough for a chair and a basil plant that drank sun greedily. She sent money home to her father. She took night classes in management. She was late twice in 6 months, both for the kind of reasons you would be a monster for punishing. Once, when a neighbor's child needed an adult to sit with him after a fire in their building. Once, when a train failed all the humans it had promised to serve. She called both times from the platform to apologize to the clocks. Our scholarship applications arrived in envelopes thick with proof of effort. You could feel the weight of mornings in those pages, the smell of bus diesel at dawn, the scratch of pencil on notes when friends were sleeping, the ache of a shoulder that had lugged a backpack from one job to a second because a third would be too much. We gave the first Evelyn Hale Awards to a girl who wanted to be a hospice nurse and a boy who wanted to own a bakery where people spoke 3 languages at once and nobody got told to go back to anywhere. At the ceremony, a young man cried into a suit with sleeves just a little too long because a tailor is a luxury when you're choosing between rent and the train. I wiped my eyes and pretended it was the pollen. Every so often, someone asked me if I'd reconciled with my son, as if reconciliation were a switch that any 2 people can flip if the lighting improves. I said, we exchange letters sometimes. He is in a program. He is discovering that apologies are not coupons you redeem for other people's trust. He is learning that amends are a thing you build, not a thing you request. People nodded because they wanted to believe it. I half believed it too on good days. On the first anniversary of the night my phone buzzed like a lifeguard's whistle, I went to the cemetery with a little bunch of daisies because my wife loved simple flowers that look like the idea of sunlight. The grass over her grave was full and green. The stone had settled into the earth the way people settle into places they decide are theirs. I told her everything. I did not edit out the parts where I did not look noble. I admitted the parts where my voice shook and I wanted to sit down in the kitchen and let the dark do what the dark does until someone turned on a light. I told her about Rosa. I told her about the scholarship kids. I told her about our son's letters, the good and the bad. I told her that telling the truth had cost us a kind of peace and bought us a different one. On my way back to the car, my phone buzzed. For a heartbeat, muscle memory made my stomach drop. I opened the message. Mr. Hale, this is Detective Carver. Just wanted you to know the lab finished the last piece. The bottle tests, the prints, the timestamps. It all lines up. We're closing that part of the file. Thought you'd like to hear a thing is finished for once. I texted back. Thank you for being the sort of man who tells people when something is finished. He sent a thumbs up, which looked funny against his name in my phone, and for once in a long time the symbol wasn't silly. It meant, this part, at least, is done. Spring settled like a chair finally pulled out for you at a crowded table. In May, a letter arrived from the state prison with handwriting I knew. Dad, it said, we made bread in class today. The teacher said it's the only thing you can mess up and still save if you're patient. She said even when the dough doesn't rise, you can make flatbread if you treat it right. The room smelled like the world should smell. I thought maybe I could apologize by making something you could eat and know I was thinking about feeding instead of taking. I can't send bread, so I send the idea of it, which is the part that matters most. I read it and laughed because he was right, and then cried because he was right. I wrote back, when you get out and you're ready to show up at 6 in the morning for the thing you say you want, come to one of the restaurants. Ask for Rosa. She'll know what to do. I tucked the letter into the shoebox with the photographs. I made dinner. I ate alone without being lonely. That is a magic no one prepares you to believe in when you are young and think love means never eating alone. After, I wiped the counter and turned off the kitchen light and stood in the doorway and looked back at my little yellow room the way you look back at a theater after a good play and think, I am glad I came. Every now and then, in the dining room, someone pushes a glass toward me and says, to fresh starts. I raise my water. We drink. We go back to work. There are 100 ways to begin again that don't require anybody going to jail. There are 1,000 ways to start over without making anyone sign something they don't understand. Most days, I get to see those ways in action. A busboy practicing English with a waitress who has time to listen. A cook who used to lose his temper learning to breathe instead. A manager who was once a housekeeper teaching a new kid how to count the drawer with both hands on the table, no tricks. I still get the occasional unknown text. Spam. Sales. The strange garbage of modern life. I don't jump when the phone buzzes anymore, but I listen to it. And when a whisper says stand up, go now, say nothing. I remember that night, and the woman at the sink who kept her eyes down so I could keep mine open, and I get to my feet, and I leave, and I tell the truth later, and I write a thank you card. The last time I visited Sycamore Ridge was for a sale. The house went to a family with twins and a dog who ran circles in the yard. I stood across the street and watched the children shriek under a sprinkler and felt something unclench. A neighbor recognized me and crossed with a pie she said she was taking to welcome them. I'm sorry for what happened, she said. We didn't know. We never do, I said, and then I surprised us both. But now we do. Before I got back in my car, I sent a text to Rosa. Save me a table at 7 by the window. I want to see the neighborhood walk by. She wrote back, always. Also, the basil is out of control. Bring scissors. So I did. And as evening turned the glass into a mirror where the dining room and the street danced together, I sat with my water and a bowl of pasta Rosa insisted I try, and I watched people who had worked all day come in to be fed, and I gave thanks for a warning that it sounded like a whisper, and for the fact that, this once at least, I listened.